What's up, junior high students? Listen, have you ever been annoyed or bothered by a younger sibling or relative? Like maybe you had a day where you were just forced to spend time with them and they followed you everywhere you went. They just didn't leave your side and they just constantly wanted your attention and you were just done. You were annoyed and you just wanted them to go away and to get away from you. Now, if you can think of how you felt and how annoyed you were them and how they were just a bother, I want you to know that that's kind of similar to how adults thought of children in Jesus' time. You see, in Jesus' day, people's worth was tied to their production. And here's what I mean. Somebody's value was tied to what can you do for me? And kids didn't have jobs. They weren't able to work. They had no money. And so adults just looked at them as a nuisance and a bother. Just get out of my way. What you have to say or think doesn't matter. You're just in my way. Please go away. And it's with this understanding of how they thought about kids that I want us to see this moment in Jesus' life where his closest followers are having a debate. Look at what it says. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" See, Jesus' closest followers are debating with one another about who and which of them is the greatest. Like, they're literally debating, okay, well, there's 12 of us, well, I'm the best, and I'm definitely better than you, and I'm definitely better than you, and they're just going back and forth and fighting about it. And Jesus is right there beside them, listening to them have this argument. And instead of telling them, setting them straight, he chooses to do something a little crazy. And I want you to see what he does next. It says that he called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." This was crazy. Jesus is essentially saying that in the same way, a child is completely dependent on everyone else and brings nothing of value to the table. He's saying that the same way we should be completely dependent on God. That we don't come to God saying, "God, you really want me to be on your team. God, you really want me to follow you because here are all the things I will do for you and for your kingdom." Jesus is saying, every single one of us comes to God the same way, and we should recognize that and live that way, that we are all completely dependent on God. God doesn't play favorites. There's nothing you and I could do to add more value to ourselves. We are valuable and have worth because God says so. And it's not like God is picking teams at PE and he's saying, "I want you and I want you and I want you," and we get to the end, he's like, "I guess I'll take you because there's no one left." In God's eyes, every single one of us has worth and value simply because we were made in his image and he wants us. And I want you to see something else that Jesus had to say. Instead of continuing to talk to them, he chose to drive this point home by telling them a story. And I want you to see what he chose to say. "What do you think if a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away? Will he not leave the 99 on the hills to go look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he is happier about the one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off." Listen, Jesus told this story in order to show us what God was really like. And as we read this story and hear this story of this shepherd that has 100 sheep and one has lost its way, we were meant to put ourselves into the story and recognize that you and me and everyone listening was the one sheep. And Jesus wants to show us that he is the shepherd and he is a good shepherd, the one who leaves the 99 to come and find the one that many would just write off, the one that many would just leave. And you and me and many of us would feel like that sheep's not worth it. It lost its way. It might just be dumb. It might just be confused. If I bring it back, it might just get lost again. And yet Jesus shows us in the story that he is the good shepherd who's willing to go and find it and bring it home. And here's the point of all of it. And here's the reason why Jesus told this story. He wanted to drive home this point that you matter to God. And that you matter to God not because of anything you've ever done or anything you ever will do. You matter to God simply because he says so. And so students, maybe you need to be reminded about this today and just be reminded of how God sees you. That when the rest of the world sees a child that has no value and worth, God sees somebody who is the greatest in the kingdom of God because they are dependent on him. And then when the rest of the world sees a sheep that has lost its way and has no worth or value and is just a lost cause, God sees a rescue opportunity and is willing to go and bring that sheep, you and me, home. I want you to be reminded today, students, that you matter to God. And you matter not because of what the world says, not because of anything you've done or will do or haven't done or you've done incorrectly, that you matter to God because he says you do. And not only you and I, students, but also other people. Are there people in your life that you've written off that you feel like have no value or worth to you because they don't do anything for you? Or they're like the sheep in the story that just seem like a lost cause and they're not worth helping, or they're just never going to come around. And I want you to think about how God sees them. That you and I were the sheep, you and I were the child that had no worth or value and brought nothing to the table, and yet God saw worth and value in us, and he came for us. And so I want us to think about that as you go back to school, into your teams, into your life, the people around you, just to be reminded that every person has worth and value and dignity, not because of anything they've done or will do or haven't done, but simply because God says so. And so how will that change and affect you, for you to really believe that you matter to God? And how will that affect and influence how you interact with other people as you look at every person realizing they matter to God too?